Welcome back to another flipped classroom, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Previously, we have looked at a timeline of the eruption based on the work of Sigurdsson, the accounts of Pliny the Younger, and a translated description of events by Cassius. Today we'll be moving on, looking at the contrasting confusion, terror, and death at Pompeii and Herculaneum. What do you think would have happened? How do you think these people would have felt? Scared, terrified, shocked? It was an event no one had previously witnessed before, an event that would shape history. Let's get straight into it. Before we do, syllabus outcomes being addressed are eruption, delimitation, viability, evaluation of sources. Please remember, like in all flipped classroom lessons, you should have a pen and paper or a laptop with you, taking down notes, which will be used to help complete the activities in class. Confusion, terror, death. Pompeii. Harald Sigurdsson suggested the Plinian phases of the eruption was not only associated with a minimal number of fatalities, but the phenomenon of ash falling would have alerted the inhabitants to the danger to which they were being exposed, and encouraged most of them to escape for the second lethal stage of the eruption. He did, however, concede escape would have been difficult, as fugitives from this phase of the eruption would have had to contend with a thick layer of loose pumice in a dark environment. Those who were struggling to escape, and those that had consciously chosen to stay behind, attempted to seek protection in their own homes, were killed by the poisonous hot gas avalanches of the second stage of the eruption. Imagine that. Absolutely terrifying. The second and most lethal period of the eruption was responsible for most of the deaths at Pompeii. Sigurdsson found that the majority of victims were found within the layers of the fourth and fifth surges that hit Pompeii. These two surges were extremely destructive, knocking over walls of the highest buildings, bringing with it poisonous gases. Asphyxiation, being killed by flying projectiles, were the main causes of death, confirmed by the position of corpses. Today's flipped classroom will be looking at two sources. The first being of Grant, the second being of plaster casts from Pompeii. Source A, Grant, an interpretation of what happened in Pompeii and Herculaneum during the eruption of Vesuvius. Evidently, the secondary source, and with the benefit of hindsight, as he was able to draw numerous research, primary sources, and site visits in order to give a more accurate account. We learned from Grant about the varied reactions of those in Pompeii to the eruption. It was due to their survival instincts. Some people believed they would be safe if they stayed indoors. In the house of Menda, slaves seem to have decided to flee upstairs by the window or the roof. They were borne down by the pumice and ashes, and tens of them died between the stairs and doors. Others covered themselves for protection, as in the case of the doorkeeper who took his little girl with him and covered herself with cushions and pillows. Others tried to take valuables with them, as seen in the house of Panza. People were found to be wearing wooden jewelry in the temple of Isis, a foreign cult of Egyptian origin. Priests attempted to set out of the temple treasures. Who would do such a thing? Imagine that coming for you and you're running away with treasures. It was a time of great confusion, emotional strain, reinforced by Pliny the Younger, his second letter referring to the quote, dazed, afraid crowds attempting to leave in darkness. Moving on, source B is a plaster cast of human remains from Pompeii. These bodies were raw, untouched, left in their original state, capturing facial expressions and body language of horror, pain, anguish. Looking at the image of the poor beggar at the top right, well, was assumed by historians the positioning of hands and body language. However, upon further investigation, historians realized the possessions found on the body contradicted this assumption, as no poor person could afford them, such as the shoes he was wearing. Instead, Heat had badly disformed the body's configuration due to the heat causing muscle contractions, which, like most bodies found, was the case. Have a look at some of the other images of these people. It's incredible how they were able to preserve them using plaster. A video further on will describe this process. However, let me ask you this. Would you like people to study your body when you die, fill it out with plaster and preserve it, or have millions of tourists look at you? These are some of the ethical issues relating around plaster casting. So, ethical issues in studying and displaying human remains. Let's start with the positives. This number one, display attracts funding. This is from the viewpoint held by museums and organizations who benefit from funding entry fees. Imagine, stats from 2014 predict 2.6 million tourists. How much money do you think that is? Quite a fair bit. These funds would contribute to the conservation of the site and further research, which is highly expensive. And is deemed acceptable by the International Council of Museums Code of Professional Ethics, respectful. Benefit number two. It is widely accepted as a study as insight into the life and circumstances surrounding the death of these people. Romans generally cremated the dead. This is a rare opportunity. In the case of Lazarus' study of 300 skeletons found in the female section of foreign baths, it provides insight into their health and ways in which it occurred. Display also educates viewers about circumstances surrounding the 79 AD eruption. For example, the boat sheds at Herculaneum reveal many attempted to flee, and Europeans and Christians have been historically accustomed to the display of remains, many chapels in Italy having relics of saints underneath them. So, is it really an issue? Negatives. Number one, the display is considered offensive and unethical. Disrespectful to the dignity of the dead. They are depicted in the pain at which they died, fractured bones, and have traditionally been cremated. The viewpoint has arisen within the past 50 years. In the 60s, with the emergence of civil rights and protests about globalization allowing people to view and learn about the display, many unaccustomed to cultures having the dead freely displayed, such in Northern Americas and Australia. Number two, study has damaging impacts. Destructive methods of study are considered disrespectful to the dead. Example is drawn from Capiso Bissell. They extracted teeth to find gum disease. They used plaster casting, epoxy resin to disable analysis of the bodies. Do you think these bodies have been manipulated? Who would say anything if there are no living relatives left? How do they go about preserving these bodies using plaster casting? This clip from National Geographic breaks this down. It also provides a greater insight into the positives and negatives of preserving the dead bodies. Moving on, let's look at Herculaneum. Do you think this would be as controversial? Up until the 1980s, it was generally thought that most of the inhabitants of Herculaneum managed to flee the city before its final destruction. Relatively few skeletons had been found in the area of Herculaneum that had been excavated to this point. There were, however, some famous examples of people who had been killed by the surge. One woman was found on the roof of a house, her skull was smashed and her pelvis and thigh bones crushed. One surge must have catapulted her a great distance. The suddenness of the surge also prevented parents from rescuing a baby from its cradle, a sickly bed bound boy from his bed. This is seen in the image on the right. Charred remains of both were discovered, with the table still beside the body. The original interpretation formed by historians was that most of the population of Herculaneum had fled. It was assumed that they had escaped by sea. However, excavations during the 1980s by archaeologists including Septimagi, Sara Bissell, covered almost 300 skeletons along the coastline of Herculaneum. The 297 skeletons have been excavated, 237 found in the barrel-vaulted chambers beneath the beachfront terrace. This is new evidence indicating that people had gone down to the beach seeking to escape where they had been killed. Terrified family groups died as they cowered at the back of the boat shed, huddled together for protection. The discovery of no boats in the shed was proof that people took refuge, suggesting that at least some residents fled by sea, and that those who died did so due to a lack of boats. The discovery of a capitalized talisman has puzzled historians. The boat had been trying to evacuate fearful residents. The work of Sigerson suggests, however, make this scenario doubtful. It may not have been launched. The so-called helmsman and boat lie at different levels of the glowing avalanche swept in the town. Concluding today's lesson, I want to leave you with this. Scholars have found it is impossible to estimate the number who died from the 25th to 24th of August 79 AD. A common figure is given around 2,000 by archaeologist Caro. That's it. I think the majority of Pompeii victims have not been found. They're still out there waiting in the city gates. They were still in the fight. This concludes the video. Please use content to answer all questions. When answering the questions, please adhere to the Nessa verb. Class, if you have questions, I'll be there to assist you.